Hi guys, how are you? My this one Titanium, the founder of IMMT, Investing MMT, and the co-founder of Pure MMT for the 100% Beyond Domains, along with my friend Edward Delzio, the author of the National Debit. Let's get started. I want to talk about my previous video because I cannot believe in the 21st century that I have to make a video to explain to people that a dollar is valued by productivity. I've been thinking about it and I'm like, what in the world is going on? What are these people thinking? How did we end up here where people can just abandon mathematics, logic, reason, and just start believing that the act of printing is value? And I go back to a conversation about a year ago that I had with my friend Teo, when I was doing a Discord session, and he brought up that, hey Nick, you know, that productivity is the center of the universe, something to that effect. And I'm like, yeah. You know, I kind of blew it off because to me, it's understood. What person in the world would believe that that is not true? And he brought it up that MMT has kind of changed that. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, but it's understood that productivity is the center of the economic universe. So I don't want to say I blew him off, but it's understood. I mean, how can you how can you possibly talk about an economy with no productivity, right? But now I understand what he's saying. I typically don't go into these intro to MMT sites. They're garbage. It's the indoctrination of politics. It has nothing to do with economics. They're useless. In fact, I got banned from there twice. And the only reason I went in there was just to see what are these people thinking? What are they, what are they talking about? Now, I've been doing this for a very long time. It's been a decade now, and I've been debunking the Austrian libertarian crazies and all these weird economic, schools. And I've been doing it for 10 years. And when I started MMT, it was like 3 channels about MMT, okay, and how the money printing is not going to lead to hyperinflation and buy gold and all this nonsense. Since then, everybody and their mom has become an MMTer. There's MMT for libertarians, there's MMT Reserve Army, there's real progressives who are MMT. Everybody and their mother is an MMTer. But the problem is they are all fake MMTers, all of them. In fact, I was the first one to start quantifying MMT, meaning that I can take that information and apply it into the markets. And then comes along Mike Norman with his all profits. I'm going to make you rich with fucking, give me $200 and I'll tell you what to buy, this trading signal stuff. And then you have, if you look up on Facebook, there's MMT trading, MMT this, and then everybody and their mom again is following my lead. But again, unfortunately, these people don't understand what is going on, what the description is saying. They don't understand macroeconomics. You have this guy Alan Longbone or whatever every single day. Oh, great news! The deficit's increased by whatever billions, and this is good, and da da da. So in this video, we're going to talk about that. But before we do that, I'm going to show you this funny post: the rock star appeal of modern monetary theory. 10 years after the financial crisis, the American economy remains in sorry shape. Kelton calls it junk economy. America is a junk economy. Think about that. We are in the longest job expansion in economic history. In 10 months, it's going to be the longest economic expansion in history. The stock market is at all-time highs. Jolts are less than 1. What does that mean? That there's more jobs than people looking for jobs. Inflation is at 2.5%. unemployment is at 3.9%. Prime age, which is what matters, is at 3.2% unemployment. Weekly jobless claims are historically low. GDP growth is above 3%. And I can go on forever. And I'll just leave you with this, that we are creating on a 3-month average 200,000 jobs, and population growth is 1/3 of that. I want you to think about that. And this PhD economist, academic, is telling you that America is a junky economy. And you know what's not a junky economy? If we increase deficits and give everybody free shit. That we created job guarantee, biggest bureaucracy in the history of mankind, of people guarding lampposts, peeling gum off the street, under the school desks, which is a private job, by the way. And that would make America great again. Now, I want you to understand, I don't have a problem with healthcare, education, and all these things, okay? I don't have a problem with them. Why don't I have a problem with them? Because a solid economy is always going to take care of the weakest. And who are these weakest among us? All of us. Because at some point through our working career, right, working lives, something bad is going to happen. That's for sure. It's never the same people, but it's always, you know, at some point it's always something bad is going to happen. And when it does happen, you need to make sure that your population is sheltered, fed, clothed, and that they have good health care, so they don't infect the rest of us or they die off, right? And above all, you have to have them educated for the private sector, okay? That is a requirement if you want to be the great economy that you want to achieve. You have to do that, okay? It's a requirement. You're not going to get anywhere if people are sick, uneducated, starving on the street, robbing, stealing, sleeping on the sidewalks. You're not going to get anywhere like that. Forget it. You can go to India, you can go to Bangladesh, you'll see that all over the place. These are third world countries. Having said that, if a job guarantee did work, well, surely you can just go to these countries and say, hey, look, why don't you print up more money and have a couple people, you know, whatever, guard this lamppost, and a couple more people over here planting flowers, and tell me if they would have economic growth. And the answer would be comically no. You would be laughing. So enough of these fake MMTers. Let's get rid of them. Okay, because what they do is, all con artists, they mix facts with fiction. Now, there's two ways to grow an economy. And you can either have the government printing money out of thin air, pumping it into the economy, and getting people to work. And this is the way people think it ought to be. This is the only way to grow the economy. Because there is no other way. And if you just have unproductive jobs, that you're going to make America great again. Well, I'm going to show you how there's a way to do it without deficit spending. And it's been done before. I know you probably don't believe me, but it's been done before in economic history. The best way, the healthy way, the proper way of growing an economy is to have investment from savings. That this dollar comes from savings to the functional economy, goes back to the savings bubble, what I call it, savings bubble, and then back to the functional economy. And this is an system feedback loop. And this is the way you grow an economy. So you say, well, that's not possible. MMT doesn't say that. Yeah, I know MMT doesn't say that. MMT is in outer space. The fake kind, not the pure kind. The fake MMT kind. So when the private sector wants to create a mall, and it pumps in these dollars for people to produce a mall, those people will then have wages and discretionary income to go back to shop in that mall, and then those dollars flow back into savings or profit for the savings bubble, for the business portion of the private sector. When the cycle is completed, you would have new jobs, you're going to have a new mall, and the economy has grown and become more valuable. Okay, because that dollar, those dollars have flowed from savings into the functional economy that produced a mall, that created jobs, goes back into profits, and you have this ecosystem feedback loop going back and forth. And this is the way you grow an economy, and this is how you create more value, productivity. Now, fake MMTers will lead you to believe that there's just not enough money in the world, and this is the problem. That there's only 20 trillions of savings from the government that equals private sector assets, right? And the deficits are only 21 trillion, so therefore there's only 21 trillion. Well, that's not true. Okay, and even if it was 21 trillion, that's more than enough to create an ecosystem feedback loop between the household private sector and the business private sector, right? These are two sectorial balances that you will never hear MMT ever talk about. They omit them. Okay, so here's reality: that there's $97 trillion, $97.7 trillion in existence. Okay, this is the daily treasury statement. So you cannot deny it. You cannot deny it. $97.7 trillion. But you listen to Natasha Kelton, and I call her Natasha because she's a Soviet. She'll be like, God, we just need more deficits. Okay, the whole thing is just fucked up. It's frustrating me. Anyway, so this is the proper way to grow an economy and to cure poverty and cure everything that you guys want to cure. That's the proper way. The wrong way of doing it is to constantly have deficits flowing non-stop and keep growing that debt to GDP. You see, when debt to GDP is growing, that is a problem. Why is it a problem? Because the amount of dollars that are being created is not reflected in bigger economic growth. GDP is not growing. So that ends up giving you a very strong signal that something somewhere within the macroeconomy is fucked up. All right, I'll put it to you nice and bluntly: something is not going right. An unproductive job is not going to grow debt to GDP in a proper way. You can pump $31,000 to 9 million Americans, and then it would be, 20 million, and then 30 million Americans when a recession hits. You can do that, but you know what's going to happen to debt to GDP? It's going to skyrocket. Because you're growing the economy with deficits, and you're not growing the economy through savings. That is the very big difference that you guys, fake MMTers, cannot grasp. It doesn't click in your head for some reason. Sure, GDP will continue to rise if you have a job guarantee. There's more dollars funneling through the household portion of the private, or the productive portion of the private sector. And all those dollars are flowing into profits, savings in the unproductive portion of the private sector. And you don't have to believe me. This is not my vague hunch or feeling. This is reality. And when I show you corporate profits and federal deficits, what you're going to see is they're very much aligned. As deficits increase, so do corporate profits. So does inequality. Okay? That is undeniable. So when Natasha Kelton comes out and starts, hey, let's blow the roof off of this deficit. Hey, we can pay for everything. Yoo-hoo, fist up in the air. Making America great again, or whatever. This is a reality. The reality is that those dollars that are deficit spent into the economy They're all going to flow through the functional economy, and then which is trickle up economics versus trickle down economics. And trickle up economics is just as bad as trickle up economics, if not worse. And you're going to end up in Texas somewhere with the 40% of the bottom 40% of Americans, this little red dot down here somewhere, if you can see it. It's not fixing inequality, but they were presented in a marketing economic way that, hey, you know, deficits are going to add to your savings. No, no, because if that were true, past 40 years, we would all be stuffed with savings. We would have so much savings, we wouldn't know what the fuck to do with them. But the reality is that those savings end up as those deficits end up as corporate profits and create inequality. And unproductive jobs do exactly the same thing. It's just the way the information is presented to you is different. That's it. So if you really want to understand MMT, the description, okay, not the political marketing economic bullshit, then what your goals should always be is that money from savings, from businesses, flow back into the functional economy, create real goods and assets, okay, flow back into those businesses, and you have this ecosystem feedback loop. Because in the end of the day, the mall is always going to be there for a very, very long time, create many, many jobs, and that's going to grow the economy. Now, that does not mean that in a time of crisis, when you have an overinvestment thesis and a house goes from 250 down to 180 or zero value for a period of time, that you cannot use an emergency tool of MMT, of deficit spending, to remove fear from the marketplace. Okay, that is what deficits are for. Another tool that deficits are good for is when the economy grows. As the economy grows, as we have more malls in the world, okay, more jobs, you need to increase, and more population, you need to increase that money supply. But usually the way it works is during bad times when there's fear that increased deficits take care of it. You don't need to keep running those deficits to grow the economy. So when there's a conversation going on Twitter, on Facebook, or whatever, remember, there's two kinds of economy. There's the right kind of economy, where investment flows back into the productive economy, which is the household, and then back into the business sector. And you have the bad kind, where you just deficit spend to infinity. So when fake MMT puts the dollar in the center of the economic universe and not productivity, okay, then something is terribly, terribly wrong. The act of printing is value. No, it is not value. It is the act of productivity. And if any dollars are going to fund investment, it should be from the savings, the ecosystem feedback loop. And when anybody tells you that that I don't understand, or you don't understand the sectorial balances, okay, I want you to show them this: that the private sector has two big sectorals: the household, which is the left, and the business. And the only way, if you want to play this balance sheet stuff, the only way that corporations can have profits, okay, is by the household having this savings. That's just the way it is. You can't have one without the other, right? You're always telling me, oh, you don't understand sectoral balances, you don't understand spreadsheets. No, I do. You don't understand spreadsheets. Okay, so when wage income comes into the functional economy, then they must dissave, right? And that becomes profit savings. And then this is the way it ought to be. This is the proper way of growing an economy. Okay. The way that MMT says we should grow the economy is that government continues to spend, and then those dollars flow into profit savings, and that's it. That's it. That's the way it's supposed to be. You know what happens when you're in the profit savings? You take your money and you go and you invest it in various asset classes, stocks, bonds, real estate, commodities, whatever, and you make capital with capital. That's what happens. And Natasha and Pavlina and all the Soviets, they think they're going to rejuvenate the Soviet Union in the US with free ponies, unproductive jobs, and they're gonna spin it with morals. Oh, aren't you sad about the 40 million? Aren't you sad? You see, they keep you looking over here about the 40 million. They're not telling you about the 500 billion at 9 million people, or whatever, that is flowing into the savings, right? The burden of investment is not in the private sector. The burden of investment is in government printing up money. And that's why they can never, ever, ever go to a third world country and implement a job guarantee and say, look, see, I told you, this is the way it works. They can't do it. Why? Because that credit card that they think they're going to use will devalue the currency and will end up like Turkey. So here we are. I'm going to show you a list of all countries, all economies that have a current account deficit, and I will show you how their currency is doing. Okay? And of course, the United States is a world reserve currency. Therefore, we must import in order for us to export dollars to the rest of the world, so the rest of the world can have dollars to interact with. UK, same thing. Canada, to some extent, same thing. So now let's start getting into the other lovely countries, like Turkey, India, Australia. Australia is a world reserve currency as well, okay, although they do have their own problems. Argentina, Mexico, France is in the euro, so skip them. Indonesia, Pakistan, Colombia, Brazil, all these currencies are getting trashed. So let's take a look at them. This is the Indonesian rupee, whatever they call it, okay, and you can see the US dollar is just absolutely trashing it, okay. It's 14,816 to 1. So let's cross this one off the list. US dollar, Turkish lira, okay, trashed. Let's cross this one off the list. US dollar, Indian rupee, trashed. Let's cross this one off the list. US dollar, Argentinian peso, trashed. Let's cross this one off the list. US dollar, Mexican peso, trashed. Let's cross this one off the list. US dollar, Brazilian real, trashed. Let's cross this one off the list. And so on. Anyway, I'm not going to do every single one. You guys get the point, right? This idea that imports are a benefit and exports are a cost and all this nonsense. Imports destroy jobs. Okay, that's the fact. And you cannot borrow, print, and import to infinity. Now, why is it that these world reserve currencies, such as, you know, US, UK, Canada, and so on, why are they, and and I'll even show you those, why is it that they are such strong economies, good world reserve currencies, when in fact they are net importers? Well, it's very simple. If you think about it, it is the ability of these strong economies to create jobs, to full employment, that gives them that benefit to be able to import. Okay? That is what makes them world reserve currencies, that they can outsource jobs and still achieve full employment. It is a testament to their strong economies that they can do that. And so when you tell me, well, you know, are you going to say that everybody should be an exporter? Don't be stupid. Don't be dumb. Okay? Stop talking nonsense. I understand, and everyone with, you know, any kind of education and logic can tell you that you cannot be all exporters. Importers are just as important as exporters. But the importers are supposed to be the strong economies, right? That's why I have a problem with Europe. Europe, what they're doing, running surpluses, is bullshit. It's not correct. And if they were to start implementing proper policies and economics, then they would become importers, okay? And then these strong economies can create jobs for the rest of the world. It's not the Turkeys of the world that are supposed to be importers. It's not Argentina. It's not Mexico. These economies, the last thing they should be is importers. So if you have a problem, Natasha, with jobs, then here's what you need to do. Start blaming the imports. But wait, we are at 3.2 prime age labor force unemployment right now. Okay? See, if you look up at these little economic raw data indicators, you would know how ridiculous you sound. We're in the longest job expansion in history. Okay? There are more jobs than people looking for jobs. See? So you shouldn't have a problem with imports, because you shouldn't have a problem with unemployment. What you should have a problem with, is debt to GDP growing. That you should have a problem with. What you should have a problem with is unproductive jobs, because all those deficits that are going to create all these unproductive jobs are going to flow into the savings bubble, the profit section of the private sector. The one that you don't recognize exists. Because while GDP will grow, okay, yeah, it will, guess what? The deficit will grow faster. And as the deficit grows faster than GDP, ultimately the currency devalues. And instead of you worrying about 9 million people supposedly that are unemployed and they're starving in the street and they're all dead, you're going to be worrying about 330 million people under those conditions. Because when the currency devalues, guess what? You got a bigger problem. These shitty countries over here, they're not shitty countries, their economies are shitty, okay? The reason that they are shitty is because not everything nets out to zero, okay? It's not this, fantasy MMT bullshit. Oh, just everything nets to zero. Yeah, got an equation for it. Balance. It's accounting identity. If it was an accounting identity and everything was perfect and everything is zero, then guess what? Turkey wouldn't be, Turkey's currency would not be collapsing. Argentina, India, Mexico, Indonesia, Brazil, across the board. Imports for these countries are a huge, ginormous cost. And what's his name? Bill Bitchell, because he's a little bitch. The Bitchell, that guy, he's an idiot. Okay? Exports are a cost. My God. And people abandon all logic, reason, and just say, oh, yeah, export. Well, if you think about it, it's like, oh my God, you're an idiot. Turkey is importing like a motherfucker right now, believe me. I'm sorry, Turkey is benefiting like a motherfucker right now, believe me. Yeah, they're so happy with all those imports. God, it's wonderful. 170% of GDP, okay, is what they borrowed to continue these imports. And in the next video, I'll talk about this bullshit of, well, don't worry about debt. It's private debt. It's horizontal money. All assets equal liability. Balance sheet. Woohoo! It's a spreadsheet. It's an accounting identity. Come on. We'll talk about that after. Okay? So remember, if you are going to import and you're going to export those jobs, okay? If you're going to import, then you're going to shrink the productive output of your economy, and this currency is going to be worth less and less and less, because what devalues the currency is a collapse in the productive output, and imports does that. And that's why in the list of shame, aside of the big economies, okay, you have destruction in their currencies, And if US were to ever implement such a stupid policy as a job guarantee and start paying everything for free for everybody, that debt to GDP will continue to rise, the private debt to GDP will continue to rise, and the value of the currency will start to devalue. And if you think because you're the world reserve currency that, you know, unproductive jobs are not going to impact our economy, you're wrong. And then instead of you worrying about 30 million people and 40 million unemployed, whatever, in poverty and all this bullshit, you're going to be worrying about 330 million people. That's just the facts. If you want to blow the roof off of this bitch and start, you know, hey, fuck it, you know, start deficit spending, you're going to end up, you see this little red dot down here? It's going to, the whole thing is going to be a red dot. Okay. Because the value of the currency is going to be next to zero. And everybody's going to look like the bottom 40%. And just because capitalism over the last 200 years has created the biggest economy in the history of mankind, with 5% of the world's population producing 25% of global GDP, and you think this is going to go on forever with these stupid Soviet policies that you're coming up with, you are wrong. You will destroy the biggest economy in the history of mankind with such nonsense. And you would do it really, really quickly. That's it for now. Thank you for listening. Don't listen to fake MMTers. Please, don't do it. Remember the proper sectoral balances, which is household on the left, businesses on the right. Businesses give wage income. This savings gives consumption gives profits and savings to the savings bubble, to the unproductive portion of the private sector. The goal is to get the private savings back into the functional economy and ecosystem feedback loop, and not deficits growing the economy, because the debt to GDP will continue to rise until we, you know, hyperinflate, not hyperinflate, but devalue the currency, and possibly hyperinflate, because the productive output will collapse. Anytime there's a recession, more people are going to leave the private sector and go to this unproductive jobs. And instead of 9 million, it's going to be 50 million, and then 60 million, and it's game over. Okay, Venezuela, here we are. Take care. Bye-bye.
Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, for inwardly they are ravening wolves. And I am his dog, the sheepdog that get the lambs back on track when they stray off the path. And some of you have strayed, haven't you? I know you're there, and I know you can hear me. You may have no tongue, but there is nothing wrong with your ears. Do you know why I'm here? I'm here to punish you.
Before this battle's over, the world will know that few stood against many.